Hey, what's going on, Roleplayers? It's the Bard here, and welcome back to the corner. Now, let's see what we've got for you guys today. I would love to hear your ideas about Warlocks that aren't complete Eldritch Blast bots. I mean, Eldritch Blast is great and all, but to get the most out of it, it gobbles up invocations and feats like there's no tomorrow, reducing every Warlock into the same copy and paste one-trick pony. There must be a more interesting way to serve my Dark Overlord. First thing I'll say is, have a look through my back catalogue. My Hexblade Guide Part 2 and 3 is all about variations to different builds. I'd also say have a look at my Ermac video, because that's an interesting take on a Warlock that I think I would like to play. However, I do see exactly where you're coming from. In most cases, it is just a case of grab Eldritch Blast, get Agonizing Blast, Repelling Blast, and before you know it, you're using up invocations left, right, and center. The only other obvious option is usually something like Hexblade with Blade Pact, Polearm Master, and then you start going down the Polearm Master, Great Weapon Master, Sentinel route, and that's just eating up feats as well. So I understand exactly what you're saying. The things that interest me are the things that defy convention. I understand why people always pick things like Eldritch Blast, Agonizing Blast, and all that kind of thing. It's because it works. It does the job, it's powerful, it's efficient, action economy. I understand all these concepts. But at the same time, I like things that are character driven as well. So we're going to set ourselves a little challenge today with this Unconventional Warlock video. So first of all, no Eldritch Blast. This means no Repelling Blast, no Agonizing Blast, no Lance of Lethargy, none of that. So all of those invocations suddenly get dropped. Also, we're not going to go with any of the cheesy feats like Great Weapon Master and Polearm Master. So those can get dropped as well. In fact, we're not even going to go Blade Pact either. This comment really intrigued me, and it was just something that's been in the back of my mind for a long time in relation to a lot of other character classes as well. So today we're going to be all about theme. If you do want something that's powerful or just action efficient, then by all means check out some of my previous Warlock videos as well. Either way, let's get on now with our character driven, theme based, Unconventional Warlock. In most cases, classes like Warlock and Sorcerer excel at blowing things up. However, they're both arcane spellcasters. But when you compare it to the most iconic arcane spellcaster, the Wizard, most people see Wizards as problem solvers, at least I do anyway. So why then can a Warlock not also be a problem solving character? Understandably, Warlocks have a very limited selection in what they can purchase, but one of their greatest strengths is their invocations and their ability to cast them again and again and again. And you really want to look at that when you're going down a problem-solving route. So first things first, I reckon you want to go with Pact to the Tome. You could go Pact to the Chain if you prefer, but I would say Tome is a little bit more flexible for your needs when it comes to a problem-solving character. Also, there's some really great themes when it comes to the concept of wisdom from madness. So I think the Great Old One Patron's again a really good choice. Not only that, it actually does come with some very useful problem-solving abilities, and we'll get into that a little bit later. We're going to start by looking at some of the invocations, and we're going to start with the most obvious one, Book of Ancient Secrets. I don't need to tell you how great it is to have extra rituals that you can add to your character. Warlocks don't get a lot of casts per day unless they're taking lots and lots of short rests, and at the same time they have to be very picky about their invocations and which ones they take. So having this extra flexibility is obviously going to be a no-brainer. It's the first invocation you want on your list because it gives you access to so much more than you would normally be entitled to. So with the obvious one out of the way, we can move on to Eldritch Sight. Eldritch Sight is one of those invocations that I don't think people really pay attention to, but I think it's surprisingly useful. Detect Magic at Will has a number of functions. Considering you're not spending any slots, you're going to be able to just keep this thing running all the time. That's a consistent 30-foot radius around you where you're detecting magic of all kinds, whether it be creature magic or whether it be object magic. There are certain things that will block this spell, admittedly, but those things aside, in many cases you've still basically got a big 30-foot sphere around you where you can sense magic in all directions. So you're going to be able to pick out lots of individual instances where there are magic items that are being hidden, where there are potential magic traps built into the dungeon, where there might be magic-based creatures that are waiting for you in ambush. So just keeping that thing going all the time, having a constant awareness, it's just like having a magical radar. And it also fits in nicely with your mad sorcerer approach, where every 10 minutes you're going to be mumbling to yourself, just to keep your spell going. There's always going to be puzzles, there's always going to be clues left lying around in unusual languages or forbidden texts and that kind of thing. So Eyes of the Runekeeper, again, it's just a good problem-solving ability, and it's one that's worth considering if you're going down this specific route. Ghostly Gaze remains one of my favourite invocations, mostly because it's really so balanced. You get to use it every rest, and it lasts for up to a minute, and it gives you a temporary dark vision and also allows you to see through walls. This thing is great. It has the potential to help you thwart ambushes, it helps you circumvent certain traps, it helps you to find secret areas. There's also the possibility of compound effects, such as Ghostly Gaze and Eyes of the Runekeeper. So you could actually use the two in conjunction with each other. You should really try to find really creative ways of combining your invocations if you can. If you're able to get your Warlock up to level 15, then something like Witch Sight or Visions of Distant Realms represents a very good choice as well for problem-solving characters. I think Visions would probably give you a bit more flexibility. It's something that you'll probably use a lot more often. If you're not doing anything strenuous, then just sit around using this most of the time. Just cast it, send it off in the direction you want to go, 30 feet every 6 seconds, and you get an hour duration on it as well, so you can cover a lot of distance. If there's nothing in the direction that you're going, cease concentration, recast it, start from the beginning, and go off in a different direction. It's really useful just for scouting ahead, especially if your party is stopped. Even if you're stopping for just a small amount of time, having a short rest or something, if you don't need it, then just use your action repeatedly to scout ahead for the rest of the team. Alright, let's get on with some spells. Detect Thoughts remains one of my absolute favourite spells. I like it because you can use it in a radius effect that gives you the awareness of knowing where thinking creatures are, but at the same time it's also versatile in the sense that you can use it for probing a creature's deeper thoughts, and you can use it for gaining information as well. I think these multi-use spells are great because you can then get much more out of them per casting. The more you can do with a single spell, the more benefit it is, considering the fact that Warlocks don't have that many spell slots per day either. Clairvoyance gives you the potential to have a lot of information very, very quickly, and with a range of up to a mile, it gives you plenty of preparation time before you have to deal with the next challenge. Dominate Person still remains one of the best problem-solving spells. If they have the information, you can get it from them. If you need someone to fight for you, they can do it for you. And if they have the abilities that you don't, if you've managed to dominate them, then you can just get them to do the problem-solving. Even your core list has some amazing problem-solving spells. Unseen Servant is great, but if you can get it as a ritual instead. Invisibility for obvious reasons. Gaseous Form just for getting around to areas you wouldn't normally be allowed to go. Fly is just an amazing ability, and Dispel Magic will come in so handy so often. Yes, you do have to be a little bit conservative with your castings, but then again that's just part of the challenge of being a Warlock. I haven't gone into the cantrips because there's really not much need for me to do so. You already have enough of them from your Warlock list, and you get 3 additional ones from anywhere you like because of your Tome Lock feature. If you want more problem solving, then go for the problem solving ones. If you need some forceful effects, then maybe Firebolt or Ray of Frost or something like that. So just pick the ones that work best for you. I'm quite intrigued by the concept of a more nature-based Warlock, so I'm thinking of having one that starts off with the PHA Patron. Even though the Archfey spells and abilities are tailored more towards an enchantment style of play, there's still some very interesting techniques here which you can use for your Swarmlord character. Also, Pact of the Chain allows you to have an improved familiar, so it allows you to get the sprite in order to keep the woodland and nature theme going. Your Misty Escape emulates your affinity towards swarms. You disappear in a puff of mist in much the same way a swarm might disperse when under threat. Alright, let's have a look at some invocations now. Cloak of Flies is a bonus action to use and it lasts until you dismiss it, so if you don't want to stop using it, you just keep it on all the time. You get advantage on your Charisma Intimidation checks, but disadvantage on Charisma for other things, but you're not too worried about that. And you get to deal poison damage equal to your Charisma modifier in a 5-foot radius. This works really well with the Gaseous Form spell, since once it's on, you can just concentrate on Gaseous Form, allowing you to move into the creature's area and continue to use your Cloak of Flies to deal it damage. This is one of the only ways that you can actually deal damage in that form. But more importantly, because you're in Gaseous Form surrounded by your Cloak of Flies, you are essentially a swarm of biting, flying, poisonous insects. Though you might capture a few of the creatures in the swarm, it really doesn't deter from the swarm as a whole. So being able to use the Trickster's Escape is very much a good representation of the fact that you can't keep the creatures pinned down for very long. In the same way these creatures don't care about difficult terrain, movement restrictions, mundane snares, neither do you. If you've ever looked at a swarm of flies or a swarm of locusts or a swarm of rats, it might look like one big mass, but it's more than just one consciousness. There are so many different creatures experiencing different senses, so I would probably say that Voice of the Chainmaster is a very good invocation for getting you more awareness in that respect. Multiple pieces of information come in from all sorts of areas, and it all coalesces together, and then the hive acts as one. So what are good choices for your spells? Infestation is one of your primary cantrips. It doesn't do enormous damage, but the real prize is its ability to move other creatures. So it allows you to break up the enemy ranks so your party can get in and really take advantage of that. The cloud consists of mites, fleas and other biting parasites, so not only is it dealing damage and potentially moving some creatures around, but it's also very well themed for the Swarmlord character. Sticking with the theme, if you need to deal a lot of damage to a creature that's getting close to you, then Poison Spray is doing a very high amount. As we've already said before, Gaseous Form is a great spell for getting around certain obstacles, and it also works really well in conjunction with your Cloak of Flies. When you are using Gaseous Form or Freedom of Movement, you want to take advantage of plant growth. It slows your enemies down to a crawl. It makes them spend 4 feet of movement for every 1 foot that they actually move. And finally, Blight is good for 8d8 necrotic damage against any target. However, if you decide to target a plant-based creature with this, it gets disadvantage on the saving throw and it takes maximum damage. This is a really strong spell which also works well with your nature-based and swarm-based themes. I don't see a lot of people going for either Archfey or Chain Pact, so it's nice to actually incorporate them not only into a character but actually have them working together as well. You might want to consider other cantrips like Blade Ward or perhaps other invocations like Gift of the Ever-Living Ones. Spells and invocations like this help you to keep your hit points really high, and it represents the fact that swarms aren't necessarily easy to damage by conventional means. Something I've been tinkering with is the concept of a Spirit Master, someone who lifts the veil and perceives into the ethereal, a character that gains its power from the spirits and uses ghostly and necrotic effects. We're going to start with Pact of the Tome for all those rituals that interact with and communicate with spirits and undead. This will also allow us to get some invocations that have that undead theme running through them as well, so that you can replicate some of the effects that you would expect to see in creatures that aren't truly alive. Also, we're going to go with Hexblade as our patron. You're probably thinking we should go with Undying as our patron, but Undying is more about cheating and defying death, and personally I feel it doesn't quite fit the theme for this character. So first up is Hexblade's Curse. Because you're dealing with spirits and necrotic effects all the time, this ability falls well into that theme. Also, if you desire to have them, you can use the curse-based invocations such as Maddening Hex or Relentless Hex. Our next main ability is going to be the Accursed Spectre, and it fits so perfectly for this theme, it just had to be included. Being that you're dealing with death and undead all the time, it stands to reason that you'd be able to summon a powerful spirit to aid you in your adventures. Right, so let's quickly move on to some invocations. Book of Ancient Secrets we've already been over and how good an invocation it actually is, so it's definitely worth considering for this character. You're going to be communicating with the dead all the time, and so I think Whisper of the Grave wants to be an invocation you want to grab as soon as possible. The dead hold a lot of information, and the more you can use it, the better off you'll be. Being around the dead all the time and communicating with spirits can rub off on you. With Aspect of the Moon, you don't need to sleep and you can't be forced to sleep, so magical sleep effects don't work on you either. The additional benefit of not having to get any rest at all and being able to be on watch constantly is also a very good boon to the party. Considering that many of your Warlock abilities refresh after a short rest, you can be on watch all night, and if you happen to spot a creature and have to wake the rest of the party, at least you'll still be in a good enough position where you can still be effective in combat. Ghostly Gaze is a potential that you could add to your list, being blessed by your spirit patron with the ethereal sight. And finally, it's worth considering Sign of Ill Omen. This allows you to get Bestow Curse, which gives you all the best hexes and some of the best haunting effects you could want. Time to move on to your cantrips and spells now. Your main cantrip's going to be Chill Touch. Good range, solid damage, has the attack roll so you have a chance for a critical hit, and it also prevents creatures from regenerating hit points that round. A very useful and overlooked ability in my opinion. Mage Hand has a ton of uses for all sorts of situations, pulling levers, carrying objects, that kind of thing, but it also creates a spectral ghostly hand, so it really fits the theme well. You want to get Minor Illusion as well. The spell's ideal for creating ethereal objects, and you can also use it for creating ghostly sounds to distract or terrify your opponents. Toll the Dead's damage increases when your target is missing some hit points, so it's great for dealing with creatures that have poor wisdom saves. Don't forget that you also have access to 3 additional cantrips by going back to the tome. Ones that are worth considering could be Dancing Light for wisp-like effects. You've got Spare the Dying if you want a greater connection between life and death. Your Vicious Mockery is like a ominous whisper in the ear of your opponent. Perhaps Message would be like an ethereal voice sending messages beyond the veil. And Thaumaturgy is your classic haunting effects causing minor wonders of supernatural power, like flickering lights, slamming doors, or having ominous whispers. When it comes to your slot spells, Hex is a classic for helping you stay more effective when it comes to combat. It also allows you to curse an enemy's particular ability score, so that they get disadvantaged whenever they use that as well. Unseen Servant fits your theme really nicely, but it's probably better to get it as a ritual instead. The invisible force moves objects around the room like a poltergeist. Combine with Thaumaturgy, Dancing Lights, or Minor Illusion, and you've got a really terrifying scene that starts to play out. Fear is a classic controlling effect that not only works effectively, but also stays true to the theme that you're trying to create for this character. Contact Other Plane is ideal if you want to get in contact with spirits from the other side. And finally, if all this spirit talk is a little bit too ephemeral for you and you need something a little bit more tangible, then Dance Macabre gives you access to a small horde of undead ready to undertake all your nefarious tasks. Some of the other spells might be worth considering from your Hexblade list as well. Spells like Blink allow you to jump in and out of the ethereal plane. Also, Cold is something that's often associated with the undead, so maybe Cone of Cold is worth looking at as well. I quite like this theme because it seems to have an interesting blend of combat and utility effects at its disposal. Also, because of the way it's laid out, it feels more like a character that exists in its own right, as opposed to just a warlock that's being granted some spirit-based powers. I really enjoyed this comment, and I thought it was a great suggestion which would fit perfectly for the Unconventional series. We've done quite well here. We've managed to avoid using Eldritch Blast for anything. We haven't had to use any feats whatsoever, so you can concentrate on all your favourites like Resilient for your saving throws or just working on your ability scores. I'm also pretty pleased about the fact we managed to keep it all contained within the Warlock class itself without having to dip into other classes in order to get certain abilities. It was actually quite difficult to make the characters work the way I wanted them to, especially when you consider the fact that Warlocks can be very limited in what they can do. Mostly, however, the things that they can do, they do very, very well, and they tend to be set up to naturally channel you towards those areas. So pulling away from that and researching other things to make them work in specific ways that go against type really wasn't an easy task, and it has taken quite a bit out of me to do it. Still, like I said before, it was a really great comment and it really deserved to have the time put into it to research the parts I needed for this video. Just a quick little note from my regular viewers, sorry I wasn't here last week. I've got so much stuff to do, with the GM's Tower and all those other bits and pieces we had to get registered as a business and all those other extras, so I know I missed a week, but hopefully this makes up for it. That aside, however, hopefully you enjoyed this Unconventional Warlock video. It's always nice to have characters that are really bright and vibrant and really break the mold sometimes, and hopefully you enjoyed watching it. If you did, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time at the gaming table.